I've been using a 2021 MacBook Pro M1 chip as a daily driver for the past few years, for working, creating content, and pretty much anything most people will use their laptops for. So I can confidently answer the question, does this Mac last a test of time 5 years later, and is it still worth picking up in 2026? You may be thinking about getting a new M5 chip, however, buying an older chip could save you hundreds. Me personally, I picked up this M1 chip pre-loved a few years ago, and boy do I have a lot to say about it. To understand why I bought this MacBook a few years ago, you need to know what I had before. A gaming PC with an RTX 3070, 16GB of RAM and a Ryzen 5 CPU. This was great for gaming and I could play games in high settings with 100 plus frames. The problem was, over time I started getting into video editing and playing a lot less games, capturing content, traveling more, and the PC just couldn't keep up with 4K files. It was slowing everything down. My whole workflow was grinding to a halt on a machine that was supposed to be powerful. I started looking for something portable, something that could actually handle the work I was throwing at it, and also something that would last the test of time, because if I'm spending this much on a computer or a machine, I want it to last. And the M1 MacBook Pro ticked every single one of those boxes. I'm not just doing light work on this machine, I'm editing photos in Lightroom, I'm editing 4K videos in Premiere Pro or DaVinci, and these files aren't compressed, so they're not lightweight files. I'm shooting high bitrate footage, and I will say, as a video editor, I've noticed that when I put this same footage on my DaVinci timeline, it does start to stutter a little bit and the playback isn't as smooth. But a quick fix is to either use proxies or drop down the playback resolution, which is the expected process for most editors. But what I will say is, when it comes to everyday tasks like using Google Chrome, having a bunch of tabs open, doing things like Notion, the really low usage tasks, you will honestly forget that you're using a 5-year-old chip, which is super impressive. And that's what Apple wanted with these silicon chips. And honestly, having this M1 chip, I've never felt like my laptop is outdated when it comes to the everyday tasks. The only real time is when it's doing something a bit more intensive, where I start to feel some of the problems of an older chip. Or maybe it's the case of the chip isn't fully spec'd out, but we'll come back to that one later. So when I say this M1 has handled all of that for 5 years, that's not nothing light. That's genuinely a heavy workload for a base model chip. But as somebody who travels a lot and this machine goes everywhere, it's not too heavy, it doesn't need a bag full of dongles, and it works wherever I am. Coffee shops, at home, the office, living room, on location, it just works. And speaking of dongles, this is one of the things I genuinely appreciate about the Pro over the air. It has everything built in. HDMI, three Thunderbolt ports, SD card readers, MagSafe. I don't need to carry a hub ever, and that frees up ports and removes a whole layer of cables from my setup, because everything just goes straight into the laptop rather than having to worry about. The MacBook itself honestly is still impressive. Apple packed a lot into a machine for the time. Most tasks run without any drama. It handles things that my old RTX 3070 PC couldn't. The screen is sharp, high quality, and most noticeable when I'm doing photo editing and color grading. A few things have saved me real time over the years. Wi-Fi 6 for uploading and sharing large video files. This is something you wouldn't think about at the time, but it actually matters a lot more than you would think, especially for somebody who uploads a lot of files to my online storage. Thunderbolt 4 for USB-C transfer speeds, which is also up to 40 gigabytes, which pairs perfectly with fast cables and card readers. And Touch ID for payments, passkeys, logins, and those little things that might feel like a gimmick actually aren't, and actually are quite useful in the real world. Now the honest part, and these cons have crept in over time. They weren't all there from day one, and the biggest one that hurt me the earliest was the RAM. 16 gigabytes at the time felt fine, but now with the work that I'm running, it is not even close to enough. DaVinci Resolve is slow, especially for 4K timelines. Playback isn't smooth. For adding another camera angle to have multi-camera angles, it's painful, and then that leads into the other problem, which is the storage. Because I have 512 gigabytes. It sounds reasonable until you fill it up. My Lightroom catalog alone is touching 85 gigabytes. My DaVinci cache, project files, 30 gigabytes regularly, so I have to constantly clean it out. Don't forget you add in the operating system, the apps, working files, and then my drive is basically full. And when things get tight, the machine crashes, not occasionally but regularly. MacBooks have this great feature where it will actually dip into the storage device to act as RAM when the RAM gets filled up. But if my storage is filled, my RAM is filling up, it just crashes. You see, right, that problem and that cycle, right? So if I could go back and spec it again, I'd get way more RAM. I'd go into 1 TB of storage minimum, and I'll probably step it up because unfortunately, as most Mac users know, once it's sealed, it's sealed. You can't upgrade anything after the fact. So as of April 2026, where does this leave me now? And I've recently upgraded my entire setup. Make sure to subscribe to see a video on that coming soon. I've got a whole entire ultra wide setup now. Things are so much better, but we'll talk about that in the next video, so make sure to subscribe to that one coming soon. My next spec is actually going for the M4 Studio machine because I think that's better handled for my workload. I work with 4K 10-bit files. These can be SI or HS files with large bit rates, so I want to be able to watch back videos and scroll through my timeline quickly and efficiently, and only really the higher end MacBooks could do that. But I found that when you get to the higher end MacBook price, you're better off getting a Mac Studio because for me that's far more powerful. And most cases when I am editing my videos, I'm doing it sat at my desk. If I'm doing some light editing, my M1 can handle it, which it has done for the past. But for the more intense videos, I'm more than likely going to be at my desk here. So why not have a studio machine that does everything I need? So if you are wondering whether or not the M1 MacBook Pro can last in 2026, honestly, I would say yes for most people. Apple's silicon chips have gotten really, really good. Honestly, it's impressed me so much that my 5-year-old machine still works great now. And I actually don't have any issues with it at a base level. My issues come from having a much more intense workload, which when you actually think about it, some may argue that I didn't actually buy the right machine in the first place, and I'm actually pushing it beyond its limits. Because if I picked up an M1 and got 30 GB of RAM, 2 TB of storage, would I still have these issues I'm having now? Who knows? I don't know that for certain. But what I can say is if you're looking for a new laptop and you're a bit tight on the budget, look at getting an older machine with higher specs. So maybe look at getting an M2 version or an M3 version with high amounts of RAM and higher storage, because I feel like there's a bit of diminishing returns when you get the latest machine at the highest price. But don't get me wrong, having a new machine is nice because it's more than likely going to last a little bit longer than a pre-loved machine. I like to call it pre-loved because you're just loving the machine. Anyway, I digress. That's where I've landed. I'm holding on for a few more months before I can get my M4 Studio. I'm waiting to find it for a good price or see if Apple release something new. But for right now, my M1 is still getting the job done, but up until the point it doesn't work or the M4 Studio I find it for a good price, I'm going to keep using it because it works, right? And my workload isn't completely slowed down. So if you buy the right laptop, spec'd out properly for what you actually do, it can generally last 5 years of heavy real world use. So the lesson isn't buy the cheapest option. The lesson is buy the right one. Get the RAM, get the storage. Think about workload might look like in 3 years, not just today, because the future you will either thank you or be exactly where I am, searching for a deal which I could have avoided by buying the right laptop a few years ago. If you are in a similar situation like myself, sitting on an older machine and wondering whether to hold or upgrade, drop in the comments below. I generally like to know what you're running and what's pushing you towards a change. See you in the next one. Peace, man.